Welcome back to Case Studies. I'm here with my friend Casey Adams, and as an intro, like we work with phenomenal operators. We work with really, really good operators. I don't know anybody like Casey. Casey has like some abilities that are just so unique. Specifically on a couple of things that you'll find founders that are really excellent founders. You know, they're that entrepreneur spirit. They can build a company and kind of create it. And then you've got kind of the other side of it, which is the investment mindset and kind of, you know, I can identify opportunities. And you have like this really unique balance of being really good at both. Really good on the analytical, kind of looking at it and making decisions, but then really good on building stuff. And we were kind of had a front row seat on the, you know, visible supply chain and watched you, you know, kind of take that thing from one level to, you know, a world-class company. Anyway, so just to kick it off, just, you know, super excited to be here with you and really admire just what you've done and also what you do. And so excited to dive in and go kind of hear the story.
Thanks.
Because I haven't heard it. Like, I don't know, like where the origins come from. I just see the results. I just see the up and to the right and everything, you know, beautiful family, all the success, you know. Is it always like that? Like, was it always easy? Because you make it look easy.
I don't know. I feel like I have these surges of unbelievably good luck, and like they just go for extended periods of time, and I feel really lucky and real blessed.
Talk to me about definition of luck, because I actually love this topic.
Yeah.
So give me your definition of luck. What does luck consist of?
To me, luck is when bad luck is when you're doing the right things and bad things happen, and good luck is when you're doing the right things and good things happen. So when your outcome is misaligned with your input, right? Yeah. So someone has good luck, they're doing the wrong things and good things happen, or they're doing, sometimes, you know, you're doing the right things and good things happen. Yeah. So I'm a firm believer that, you know, it's a big statistical model, how well things go. Yeah. And I've had some really good runs of luck. Like when I met my wife, that was the start of an unbelievably good run of luck. Yeah. When I left private practice and went in-house at Visible, there was an incredible run of luck. And there were things I did good, and there was stuff that I was good at. But the luck in many ways outstrips my input.
My experience though is that successful people succeed consistently over time. Like you'll see, you know, a coach that's a championship coach kind of goes to a new program and succeeds, and then goes to a new and you know, I see that in your career where, you know, part of that could be attributed to luck, but there's also part of it that's like there's operating principles.
Yeah. And doing the right thing increases your chance. Yeah. Right? Like there's no doubt about it. But I feel like I've had a lot of really cool tailwinds, and I just was willing to capitalize on them. Or I was in the right place and I was working really hard, and then, you know, got a great outcome that went far beyond the amount of work I put in.
Maybe go back to the beginning though. Where did it all start? So you're from the East Coast.
I grew up in New Jersey. Yep. My family was a casino family, so I was in Vegas until I was 11.
So talk to me about that. What does a casino family mean?
My dad worked in the casinos, and when the casinos started opening in New Jersey,
so kind of all things gaming, you know, the whole process, kind of the gambling industry.
That's a very insular industry. Yeah. And if you think back to the 70s and the 60s in the U.S., the places you could gamble in the United States were very few. Yeah. Right? They hadn't gone to the Indian reservations yet. They hadn't gone to the riverboat gambling yet. They hadn't gone to the offshore gambling.
Vegas was kind of the spot.
It was Nevada. Yeah. Vegas and Reno. And my mom's family's from Nevada. So after they got married, my dad was working in a copper mine, and my mom and he were living in Nevada, and her older brother, who had gotten into the casino industry, or the gaming industry as they call it, he was like, hey, come down to Vegas. They need good people who can do stuff. Come down to Vegas and work. So my dad got into the gaming space shortly after he had left college. And like I said, very insular community, very small community, surprisingly high level of Nevada natives in it, especially early on at that time.
Yeah.
And so he came up in that space, and we moved to New Jersey after they opened the casinos there.
Yeah.
Like Atlantic City Island was allowed to have gaming, and that was kind of the first on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And
because now you have it in a lot of places.
Now
you got
it's
in
all
Massachusetts. Kind of everybody is creating space to go have that.
But at the time it was, hey, here's the expansion. So all of these casino companies that had grown up in Nevada, they were sending their experts out to Jersey to open casinos, to start operating.
Where you get talent from. Yeah.
And so we were part of that. My dad had started opening casinos in South Jersey early on, late 70s, early 80s. And we moved out to Jersey in very early 85.
Yeah.
With the Showboat, which was a casino organization there in Vegas. And they were opening a casino in Jersey. So we moved out there with that. And my dad opened a few more casinos there. And then we didn't move when he went other places to open casinos.
You left that as home base.
We stayed there. Yeah.
It was Jersey all the way, growing up. You grow up all the way before you kind of came out.
Yeah. So that's where I stayed until I came to BYU for college. And came to BYU for college on an academic scholarship.
Talk to me about growing up in the gaming industry. Because you had some fun stories. You had some fun gambling stories about like the way that you thought about risk. Because this is at a young age. You know what I mean? And some of this stuff's intuitive. Some of this stuff is just like, some of it you're born with it. And I was interested to see how you thought about risk and how you thought about.
Well, I'll tell you a fun story. So when I couldn't have been more than 14 or 15. And my dad was in gaming. My uncle was in gaming. And I can't remember what the holiday was, but my uncle and his family were over at our house. And this is my Uncle Shannon, my mom's oldest brother.
Yeah.
And my Uncle Shannon, it was pretty clear he knew everything, at least to me at that age. Right? He just
had all the answers.
He just seemed to know everything. He was like chairman of the board of a gaming organization. He was personal friends with Steve Wynn. Wow. He had been an attorney. He had helped start, he would go on to help start the UNLV law school, right? He wrote the seminal textbook.
He's sharp as a tack.
Just as smart as anyone, right?
Yeah.
And it was obvious even as a kid that he was super smart.
Yeah.
So I had, my 5 minutes with my Uncle Shannon, and I said, hey, which casino game is the best one, when I'm old enough to gamble, which one's the best one that I'm going to win all my money at? And I remember him just like laughing, which in retrospect, it was because it's a stupid kid question. And he says, Casey, they have those big buildings because you can't win at the games. He's like, they're games of math, and the math says you lose. And that's how they all work. And even if you think you're winning, that just is to get you to stay around longer because the math says you lose.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you want to make it so the math is close, he gave me some suggestions. You could play some blackjack. The math's okay. The pass bar. He gave me some suggestions of where it was only a little bad.
But kind of said like,
he's like,
this is a loser's game.
Don't do that. Yeah. Don't play those games. That's a great way.
I love like a gambling night, in Vegas, but I know I'm losing the money.
Yeah.
If I win, that was a bonus, but it's like, we're going to go have some fun with friends, play some games. And that's my entertainment.
And it's entertainment, right? And I think that that's a good way to think about it. I think that there are a lot of people who think that there's some system.
Yeah.
That is going to make it so that they can
win.
If I figure it out, I'm going to tilt it to my direction.
Yeah.
You can't. It's math. The math says you lose.
Yeah.
And so that really, in many ways, like you mentioned, the difference between me as a manager or founder, and the difference between me as an investor.
Yeah.
I view investment as math.
Very, very calculated.
Yeah, it's just math.
Yeah.
Same as the casino games, except
emotional.
You can actually win.
You're not falling in love with them.
No. And it's just a question of risk and reward, and looking at your reward and weighting it with the risk and trying to mitigate the risk.
Yeah.
Ways that you believe you can do that. But yeah, it was very helpful to me at that age, and it still has been. I worked in casinos. I tended bar and casinos and waited tables and parked cars and swept trash and like
you're truly in that industry.
Yeah, like it was so easy to get a
job,
a well-paying job.
Yeah,
like I paid for my mission sweeping trash. I was on the grounds crew at a casino.
Come on,
they paid me $12.80 an hour.
That's crazy. That's like what in today's dollars, you're like $30 an hour.
It was great.
25, 30 bucks an hour.
And so I would do 32 hours of the week. It was a union job. And I got $12.80 for 32 hours. And then I got a rate bump. I was as a Class C, what was it called? Operational Engineers Union. So as a Class C member of the Operational Engineers Union, I got $12.80 an hour for 32 hours of the week. And then one day of the week, I bumped up to Class B and I got $14.88.
Come on. As like a high school kid.
Yeah. Just
so the grind was just,
and it was graveyard shift.
But what was it? Your parents telling you to go work, or was it like this desire that like I want to go make money for myself?
There wasn't money floating around.
Yeah, so it was there was a need in the family.
There was a need, and it was just very much like mentioned to the various casino executives there in the ward. That you needed to make money for your mission.
So talk to me about that. I'm kind of switching topics, but I'm always fascinated. How do you think not having money growing up influenced your ability to make a lot of money?
I don't know that it influenced my ability to make a lot of money.
Desire?
I think those are separate, right?
Yeah.
Like ability is I think is separate equation, but desire absolutely.
But desire kind of precedes the ability a lot of the times, or at least the skill.
You know what I mean? That ability,
right?
Like it. So I think that's where it impacted. I think there was a desire to provide for my family in a different way.
Yeah.
So my dad, he had been in that casino space. That was his knowledge base. That was his expertise. That's what he was good at. He decided to leave that space for a variety of reasons, and found that none of his skills translated very effectively.
Yeah.
So he went
he had a
from
very specialized skill set. Yeah.
He went from a vice president of administration at a casino owned by Donald Trump in the early 90s, late 80s, where he was making $150,000, $160,000 a year.
Really good money back then.
To the assistant manager of Wendy's.
Come on.
In a 12-month period. And watching that, I was like, okay, I don't ever want to do that.
How old were you when that happened?
And that was late high school. So sophomore, junior, senior year of high school, watching this precipitous decline. And then he would flirt back with the casino space to keep the wolf away, and then try and sell insurance or whatever. But it was something that was very informative to me of, okay, I again, going to kind of that theme of risk and reward.
Yeah.
He did not have a skill set that was transferable and that was translatable. And so I wanted to make sure that whatever I ended up with, it was that. It was this kind of baseline skill set, this toolkit that would make me money regardless.
Did you know it was law from day one, or was it just...
No, the law thing was very late.
Because you said academic scholarship, so you were smart.
Yeah.
I did
okay in school.
Yeah, as far as like, and anybody who spends time with you just knows you're really smart. Like you not only like know a lot of things, you're really good at articulating points and taking complex things and breaking them down to very simple things or concise points.
Yeah.
But that was always just something that you always had that. Like as far as like,
I don't know about the ability to articulate. I think I picked that up.
The horsepower, though,
the pure horsepower.
Yeah, with that.
I was pretty smart. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the law thing was late. Like I graduated with a degree in economics.
Okay.
With a very mediocre GPA.
Interesting. So it wasn't like you weren't that into the grades in college.
No, I wasn't very academically inclined. I spent as many semesters out of school in undergrad as I spent in school.
Yeah, so tell me about that, because to get an academic scholarship, you've got to have great grades.
Yeah.
And was it just kind of like, I already got it, it's done? Or like,
no,
just a different desire in life, or what?
Man, college was a little more distracting, and I didn't see a direct correlation between the grades I was getting and my outcome.
Yeah.
And I wasn't super driven personally at that time. So yeah, I was a pretty mediocre student. I think I had a 2.7.
Wow.
At BYU. And then I talked my way into a job in a chief economist's office. This guy, Jeff Threadgold, had been the chief economist of KeyBank, went out on his own. He was his office supported Zions Bank, which was a primary government bond dealer and required to have a chief economist. Yeah. Right. So he did that, and he'd do like speaking events and stuff. And he had hired a academically much better and much more skilled econ kid instead of me when I applied for the job. And 30 days after I applied for the job, I stopped back by his office. He told me, "Hey, I got this other guy. He's way better." I just stopped back by his office to see how things had gone with the other guy. And the other guy had already told him he was on his way to going and getting a master's in econ. And so Jeff, exited that guy and hired me.
That's amazing.
Just opportunistic.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I was doing that. I was working in that environment. My wife was much more driven academically.
You guys got married when?
It would have been 98, 99.
But like
90s,
through that college experience,
yeah.
Early, late?
So at about her third year of college, she graduated undergrad in 3 years.
Okay.
She was just starting law school when we got married.
Yeah, I remember that now, that both of you guys are attorneys.
Yeah. So she was starting law school. And then I was watching her practice law after I graduated. In fact, she graduated law school the same time I finally got through undergrad, even though I started 3 years prior than her. But yeah, so she was very focused, and that helped me to get more focused. But I was sitting there working in Jeff's office and doing some selling and managing the phones and doing a little bit of math and keeping some models for him and watching what my wife was doing. I'm like, man, I could totally do that. We'd make more money if I was doing that. And that's what got me to take the LSAT. And you just
said, "Hey, I'm going to go take the LSAT and pass it."
I did well enough on the LSAT that I was like, "Oh, I should apply for a law school." And I applied to one law school, and I got in, and then I went.
And you went to
the U of U.
Okay,
yeah. So just up the hill from where we lived.
Yeah.
And my wife asked me, actually, she's like, "Don't you think you should maybe apply to a couple law schools?" I said, "Well, if I don't get into this one, I'll do something different. I just need this, kind of a baseline gig, and I don't care what it is." So to me, it wasn't like, I have this passion.
This is my career. This is going to be.
I'll go be an architect, or I'll go I'll do something else.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and it was really fascinating, especially early in law school, because
when you're like describing yourself as like not super ambitious, I see you now, and I'm like, this is one of the most ambitious people I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
Like it's like the projects that you're signing up for are massive projects.
Yeah.
In a lot of different, when did that switch? Like, when did it go from
law school?
That was when you learned it.
Law school. Yeah. First semester of law school is like this incredibly important semester for your outcome, your ability to make money as a lawyer. And if you do well in that first semester, you're going to make some money as a lawyer. And if you don't, you're not. And so I was doing this to make money. I wasn't doing it for.
So you geared up for that first semester.
So I thought I had killed it, man. I thought I was so good. I thought I had studied so well and done so well, only to find that I was at the very top of the bottom half.
Come on,
middle of my class, right? The
so
lower
you were
part,
certain,
but middle
you were
of my
certain
class.
That you were like
and I thought I
upper quartile.
Oh, dude, I thought I was top 10. And I was bottom half. And I remember we're looking at my grades in my wife's office, and we look at it together, and she turns to me and was like, "Well, I mean, you can do a little better than this, I think." And I'm like, "A little better? This is awful." She's also, "Are you going to quit law school?" No, I can't. That's unacceptable. There's no way that those kids are smarter than me. I can figure this out. I just haven't figured it out. And by the time I graduated, I was in the top 10% there at the U. Because
so it was just
I figured
a belief.
it out.
It was just a belief that they're not better than me.
Right. And a willingness to go to the mat and figure that out.
Yeah.
Like I went to every professor who would take a meeting and asked them how to think about getting good grades. I figured out who all the best students were, and I went and asked them what they did and compared it to what I did. And I built my own process.
Well, what you're describing there has created more success for me than any other habit in my life, which is interview people that are the best in their field and just copy them.
Yeah.
Like just, and people don't do it. Like, it's so fun to hear you say, I went and I figured out who was the best.
Yep.
Downloaded their secrets and applied it. Took the, and I'm like, that has changed my entire career. I could give you fate. Like, we were just with Brian Murphy. Like, I'm not a finance guy. I dropped out of college. Like, that's not my world. But there are people that are brilliant.
Yeah.
And they'll share their stories with you. And if you go to the ones that are worth talking to, you get really good maps of like how the world works.
That's exactly right. I was talking to, I think it was a kid studying entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And they're like, tell me your best business ideas you haven't gotten around to. I said, I don't have business ideas. What are you talking about? I'm not trying to create something or invent something or make something new and novel and interesting. I'm trying to take 99% copy and do one little thing a little bit better. Be more charming, be more entertaining, make it a little cheaper, make it a little nicer, something. But I want to copy everything up to that point.
You don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And most things have been thought of before. And the example I gave to this student, I pulled out my iPhone, which I think is one of the most transformative products.
Of course. Right?
It's changed how everyone works. And I said, look at the iPhone. The iPhone's a great example of what you're talking about, right? And she says, yeah. I said, no, it's not. It's not an example of what you're talking about. I had a BlackBerry before I had an iPhone. A lot of people did. And that had my email, and it had internet, and it had a phone capability, and it kept all my contacts, and it had a clock. It is fundamentally not different than my iPhone.
Yeah.
So why didn't it transform how everyone operated? I said, iPhone's a good version of a BlackBerry.
I remember when they first came out, and the BlackBerry was it. Like that was if you wanted the phone, it was almost like a keyboard. You had like every single note, and it was like the business phone. And I remember the iPhone came out, and I had my buddy that had one. Terrible batteries. You drop it, the whole screen shatters. And I'm just like, there's no way that catches on.
Yeah.
Like that's so gimmicky. And it was like a year or two later, and it took over the world.
Totally.
And it hasn't stopped,
I had a BlackBerry, and I was at one of the law firms I worked at, which was this AmLaw 100 firm, so top 100 firms in the world, called Ballard Spahr. And all the associates had BlackBerries, the blue ones. We called them blueberries, right? But the blue BlackBerries, the nice ones. And they had a whole training course on how to use it, and there was like a book on how to use it. And my son was not quite a year old, and we went by an Apple store. Or maybe it was a phone store that had an iPhone in it. Memory's not that great. Yeah. But and he walked up to an iPhone that was on display. And remember how it used to have the little block to open it? You'd slide the block across. So he goes, slides the block, and engages one of the apps. And he's like, not even one.
Is your son?
It is my son, yeah. And at that moment, I was like, I got to get trained to use this piece of crap. And my
like a whole
1-year-old did this thing like this, right?
Wow.
Boom. Like I was certain that Apple had something huge then. I bought an iPhone, got one for myself and my wife, got rid of my flip phone,
Yeah.
And then started trying to talk my firm into letting me use my iPhone for my firm emails instead of my BlackBerry.
You go back to those times. And it's going back to that point of saying like,
just do it better.
How did you rise to the top? And that formula, like, talk about like applying that in other.
And the formula to me isn't just like finding experts and asking them. It's being internally honest about weakness.
Yeah.
And admitting, hey, I should be good at this and I'm not. I should know this and I don't. Like being able to admit that. Don't let your ego get in the way of your ignorance.
Yeah. Fake like you know it.
Yeah.
Which I think most people do. It's like, you posture as if you have the answers.
Right.
And it's unproductive. You know.
So that to me is the first part of the pattern. The first part of the pattern is figure out your weakness that you can admit to yourself as a weakness.
Yeah.
And that you need to make a strength. Whether it's how you analyze investment opportunities or how you analyze raising your kid, how do you coach the junior jazz basketball team, whatever it is, identify that as a weakness and then go through your personal Rolodex, identify all the people who are experts at that, talk to them, expand out one person from them, gain like a real understanding
super
of the
fascinating
space.
topic, and I've got opinions on this, but I want to hear yours. How do you think about strengths and weaknesses?
What do you mean?
When you kind of, when you're thinking about your career, is it to be well-rounded? Is it to double down and go in on the things you're great at? How have you built, because it feels like you're kind of good at most things. Like you're pretty well-rounded.
It's not intentionally well-rounded. It's more like needs-based.
Out of necessity.
Yeah. And it's run in the process. I was at what was called ProStar at the time, and we needed to be better operationally, for example.
Yeah.
And so I engaged directly in our operational leadership to see what was happening and why we were performing the way we were and how we could perform better, and realized we needed a whole lot more strength in that area. So I read anything I could find
leaned in
on Six Sigma, everything on how to do lean, everything on, how did the Kaizen process work in Japan?
Wow.
I learned everything I could because the necessity was I needed to not suck.
Yeah, we need to operationalize as a
we needed to get really good and
I
efficient.
need to. Yeah, it's interesting that you say you studied lean and Kaizen and Six, because I can see that like in those later businesses.
Right.
They were operational machines. You go from like, hey, we need to get good to like, that is your strength, is that we just execute better than everybody else.
Absolutely.
Similar industry, but we execute better.
So it became a strength, but it was a weakness, and it was something that was like, okay.
Do you think it was a weakness, or do you think it was like an undeveloped? Because my personal feeling is it's very hard to take weaknesses to strengths. And I just haven't seen it that much. I've kind of seen
I don't know if it was a weakness. It's potentially, it was just an undeveloped area. Right, because in large degree, even thinking back to when I was doing waiting tables or tending bar, I always would turn everything into a process.
Pretty operational.
Here's the process you do.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if you've ever thought about driving a street sweeper through a parking garage.
I've never thought about that.
But I can tell you the process. The one I developed for myself, right? And how you go about doing it, how do you do it so it's perfect, takes the least amount of time.
Because you describing that as a weakness. I'm like, there's no way that's a weakness.
But anything's a weakness until you develop it.
Yeah.
Right. You can have someone with amazing lung capacity, but are they a great distance runner?
Yeah.
No, they're just a dude with amazing lung capacity.
Yeah.
And then when they develop that lung capacity for the use case.
It's that parable of the talents. And it's kind of, we'll get to this later, but it's kind of what life's all about, is just seeing what you can do with the hand that you're dealt, like how far can you take it? How far can you push it?
Yeah. But for me, absolutely. I feel like I am a pretty well-rounded executive now.
Yeah.
But it was always necessity-driven. It wasn't interest-driven. I didn't say to myself, man, I would really love to get my mind around finance.
You just had to get your mind around finance. Instead,
it was like, dude, someone needs to figure out finance. And I'm somebody. So I'm going to go figure out finance, right? And then who do I know that knows this?
If I was observing things that you're really good at, it's figuring things out. Like you get to the core of things pretty efficiently. Like you get in and you get your hands dirty and you get pretty
and that's an important
root cause of the problem.
I like that. Yeah. And that's an important attribute. I think if I had a dominant strength that resulted in my business success, my personal success, it would be a willingness to dig into any topic and try and figure it out.
Yep. Yeah. Get smart.
Get smart about it, figure it out, translate it into something I could understand, or that I had some background in, and make it familiar, and then gain capability.
Because that whole process of Kaizen, it's just about like getting a little bit better every day, right? It's stripping. It's kind of simplifying. It's getting the steps down to kind of the very most essential pieces.
Yeah, well, and it's about going to the activity directly. That I think is the most important part of it.
Interesting.
It's the part people skip a lot when they're trying to become good at something. is they want to beat around it or circumvent it
instead of just going
Just
straight
go directly to it.
Yeah,
That's the fundamental part of that whole discipline.
Yeah.
Is to go and be present and watch the activity and participate in the activity and get smart.
So talk to me about this transition of, I'm at a law firm, I'm working 78, like the badge of honor at those things is if you bill more hours than anybody else. You know what I mean? They just have this culture of work.
Yep.
And how do you go from that to entrepreneur? What's that transition like?
So I had been at an AmLaw 100 firm for 3 years. I transitioned, I lateraled, they call it, to a regional firm, so a smaller firm.
Okay.
With a really great attorney that I could work for and learn from and be mentored by.
Yeah.
And he was fantastic. Name is Craig Marriager. I truly believe he was the best litigator in Salt Lake the whole time he practiced. And he only did this narrow segment of law. He did architect and engineer malpractice defense.
He was just
But I truly think he was the best. He was the best strategist. He knew his area of law better than anybody. He was always winning even when he was losing. Wow. So if he had a bad case, he would settle out better than some other person would settle out. Yeah. He was just so good
the best
for his
outcome
clients.
From every.
So I learned a ton from him. But after about 3 years there, I had reached a point. There were two things really that pushed me. There's a little crazy that you become if all you do is fight people. Like if what you do for a living,
you start getting wired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know that feeling like when you've just had an altercation, you just argue with someone.
High stress.
You just disagree.
Almost like testosterone.
That internal
pump,
feeling. Yeah, you got a fight or flight just kicked in. So you got some testosterone surging. Yeah. Your adrenaline's high. Imagine if you had that all day, every day for 6 years. Right? Like you get a little bit
you just
nutty.
don't like kind of who you're becoming.
Yeah. Well, and the litigators who like it almost seems like it becomes a drug for them, and they really like it.
It's a high.
Yeah. It's a high. So then they're actually seeking the conflict a lot of times.
Yeah.
So that was problematic to me. I was observing. My wife was also a litigator.
Did you like it?
Also liked it.
Did that scare you? Like, hey, I kind of
it didn't scare me, but I did.
You liked it.
Like it's a surge. It's an adrenaline surge, right? But my wife and I were both litigators at the same time. She was much better than I was.
Is that like a problem? Were you guys like litigating each other?
It didn't create a problem, but it made for weird conversation patterns.
Yeah.
Right? So, and
because your wife is like so sharp.
So sharp.
Like,
and seeing it through the eyes of our friends, like friends that drive on a road trip with us and be like, you guys have the weirdest conversations. And then I would like replay the conversation in my mind and go, that is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like we're deposing each other insteed of like talking.
Like connecting.
Yeah, we're deposing. Yeah. We're asking pointed questions and we're trying to drive to the outcome. And like it was a little strange. So that was a little strange, but I wouldn't say it was catastrophic in any way. But I reached a point also around the second item, which is practicing law in that private practice environment. Your time is the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
Okay. And you think about your normal workday, like back when you were at Vivint, you would go to the office and there was a certain amount of socializing that was part of your job.
Yeah.
What if that didn't count?
That's crazy.
Right? What if that didn't count? What if the socializing
that's the only
count?
thing that like...
That's what gets you to work, right?
That's the magic is the, and I think about Peter Drucker. He wrote so many phenomenal books, but he's got this book, The Effective Executive. Mm-hmm. And Great his book. Whole thesis is that about half your schedule should be open.
Right.
That you have that spontaneous time, you have that creative time. That we were up in a meeting that was supposed to go an hour and it goes 3.
Right.
And if you're just scheduled down to the minute, the gold never comes around. But then in that world that you're talking about, like you're not making money.
Right.
Like you need to be billing those hours.
It creates this weird neuroses. And so the part of me that, and I love Drucker, by the way, but the part of me that agrees with Peter Drucker was like, no, you have to come to the office. You got to go bounce around to other people's offices. You got to go talk to people. You've got to connect. You've got to get
managed
mentors.
by walking around, just like being there.
Yep. And you've got to get all that going. But every 6 minutes that I spent doing something like that
it's costing money.
Was a 0.1 that I didn't get to bill. And then your whole life gets dialed into these 0.1s.
Too efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, went to the copier 0.2.
Oh,
right.
Man.
And so you're out with your friends and you're like, man, I don't know if that was worth 1.4.
Yeah. That trade-off. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still going to have to bill. You go on vacation, you still have to bill that year. So vacation just means you go on vacation and then you have to
more
bill
hours
later,
when you get
right?
home.
I was a little irritated being a litigator, but I was also really good at settling cases.
You were good.
And I did a good job. And I had a great mentor and I had a great path there. But it was that hourly thing that kind of pushed me over the edge where I went out to the movies with my buddy that I was playing beach volleyball with at the time. And he's like,
is that
Jared Starling?
Yeah.
And he was like, so how's work? I said, it just occurred to me today that like, it sucks. I'm all, it just like it hit me today that it sucks.
You're not happy.
And he's like, well, what? Like, you don't like the litigation or you don't like the law? I said, no, I don't like the notepad that is next to my computer that says, 0.3 and then, wrote email to so-and-so. Like that makes me crazy. I'm all, this movie is exactly, I can't remember what the number was, but it was like, this movie is 1.8 hours.
So you're just thinking like that.
Yes.
That's the paradigm that you're seeing.
My
in the
whole
world
is 6-minute increments.
And is your wife seeing it the same way? Like, is she?
I think she liked that whole world being 6-minute
She liked
increments.
it. Yeah.
I think that made her feel great.
Because my wife would probably be pretty similar, like the structure and that.
She loved writing it down and checking it.
Yeah, the check marks.
And I hated it. And that was when I realized and was willing to verbalize, hey, I hate this.
Yeah.
This, 0.1. And he said,
was that profound for you to like realize like,
yeah, it was a crucial moment. And
I don't want to do
Jared's
this.
response was great. He's like, well, I told you before, anytime you want to come work for me, we can figure that out.
Wow.
And I said, well, and I told you before, you actually can't afford me. Like you can't afford to pay me to do legal work. He's like, well, just do other stuff. I had done legal work for him, solve problems for him.
But he knew you. And he knew like.
He's like, just do other stuff. You can do whatever, but, earn your value. And so we worked out a reduction in income that was pretty substantial.
Yeah. Because when you went to Visible, it's kind of what type of revenue company?
10 million.
So small
revenue.
Small company. Yeah.
Yeah. And a couple $100,000 of earnings.
Okay.
So tiny company with no excess.
So you're grinding, like you caking anything. There's not much to take. Like
right.
There's not much at the end of the day.
There wasn't much to take. And so it was very much, I had to bring value. And that was at that time preferable to billing hours.
That was exciting to you.
It was, and building something and solving problems before they got ugly.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that he and I both knew that I could do. He had some really ugly problems.
Yeah.
That put his family's well-being and his business at risk for lack of
just not getting in front of it, just not being proactive.
Yeah, and not understanding what some of his choices
strategically,
were.
Getting them all on the table.
I mean, I remember one time he called me and he said, it must have been a Monday. He called me and said, this company won't pay us and we're going to go out of business because then we won't be able to pay UPS and they're going to shut off our account and we're going to be out of business. And I said, well, all right, we'll send over the contract and I'll look at it and send over their invoices. And this company hadn't paid them for months. And I looked through the contract and there was no waiver of consequential damages. So anything that came of a breach of that contract, they could be sued for. The company could. And so I said, Jared, these guys, they'll have to pay for the damage to your business. Like they don't just have to pay you what they owe you. They're going to have to pay for whatever they break by not paying you. And he's like, is that normal? I said, no, that's awful lawyering. That's just really bad lawyering.
They left some holes.
Yeah, huge hole. And he's like, well, I really need the money by Wednesday. And I'm like, you can't get all this money by Wednesday. There's no way. It was millions, right? I'm like, there's no way they have it just sitting around. What's the drop dead number you need by Wednesday? And then we'll work with that. I'll call their lawyer and I'll work through it. So he gave me the drop dead number. I called the lawyer. I said, hey, you guys are in breach of this contract. Here's the problem. And he's like, yeah, we'll just pay you when we get to. And I said, no, you botched it, man. You didn't waive consequential damages. He's going to go out of business. And I'm already figuring the value of his business. You're going to have to pay for all that too. And he's like, oh, are you sure? I'm like, read your own contract. And
money shows up.
Yeah. So Wednesday, they got enough money to keep UPS happy. Friday, they got everything. They didn't even negotiate down the price, which was their original position.
Yeah.
They wanted to drop the price. No, once they were aware of the legal ramifications of that breach. And so Jared thought I was a miracle worker.
Oh my gosh.
He's like, dude, you can do magic. And I'm like, no, I can't. I can read.
But you absolutely could do magic.
I can
look
read
at what
plain English.
you guys created together. And I'm like, that is a great partnership.
Yeah. So he really felt that I could bring some value.
He valued you a lot.
And I came over and I feel like I did. I feel like I brought value. And he and I were a very good ham and egg.
Yeah. Still are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good team. He's much less risk averse than I am.
Yeah.
I'm not super risk averse, but I'm not entrepreneurial in that way. And he is.
He's pretty entrepreneurial.
Yeah. And so that pushed.
Which makes sense. He was the one that founded the company and he was doing it. Yeah.
So he was pushing the cadence and willing to take the risks. And then I was mitigating the risk and saying, well, yeah, I'm fine with you taking a risk of that size, but here's what I need to feel comfortable with. And that became a really good thing where he was pushing, he was kind of the engine and I was driving.
Yeah.
And that was very good.
That's super cool. So talk to me about 10 million to Cynosure.
10 million until the Cynosure deal. Yeah, the biggest thing that I realized early on in that business was that we kept getting fired. Our best clients, our biggest clients fired us like every year. Yep. And they fired us for operational failures.
Elaborate.
They fired us because they didn't understand what we were charging them for. They fired us because they thought they could do it themselves.
Yeah.
There were a lot of reasons they were firing us, but they were just firing us all the time. Sometimes Jared fired them. Yeah. That also happened a lot.
Yeah, he's just like, I can't
he would
deal
go
with
to
this
meet
anymore.
with them and they would tell him, your business sucks. And he would be like, great,
Screw
we're
off.
not working for you. So there were some things there. And I just really felt legal training made me very capable of convincing clients that they wanted to stay. So I said, I'll take that over. We're not going to get fired again. So the first big thing I did was work out how we were going to manage our customers, how we would change our invoices so the customer could see that value was given, value received, right? How we would answer their questions and concerns.
Just to kind of a better user experience.
Yep. How we would lift that user experience and how to do that so that it became what we did well.
Yeah.
Right. Because because
you obviously weren't doing it well.
No,
like it was a problem.
But the whole space was awful. Right. The fulfillment space when I went to see, because again, I tried to figure out what everyone else was doing and copy that. What I found was everyone was bad at it.
Yeah.
Right. And so warehousing and fulfillment services, everyone hated their user
fairly
experience.
new though, like it kind of an emerging, growing with the internet. Like it's kind of this beast that, now you look at it and it's so, everything's an internet business. Every real estate, new building going up is
some
industrial warehouse. Yeah. It's like, it's so internet focused, but when you were doing it, it was early.
It was
earlier in that kind of
earlier
evolution.
In the cycle. And the people who used those services were multi-level marketing companies, direct response companies, and the very beginning of the internet companies.
Yeah, interesting.
Right? So figuring out that the user experience was awful was crucial. And then figuring out how to go about, okay, what do I fix first? What do I fix second?
Talk to me about like your philosophy on customer experience. Like when you think about customer experience,
for that business, the most important thing to me was that a fulfillment house was not transparent to their customers, but was a crucial part of their customers' experience. And so I wanted to make it transparent. I wanted them to understand what we were doing, why we were doing it.
Yeah.
I wanted them to feel like our warehouse was theirs. So I took the novel approach of allowing the customers to come in the warehouse whenever they wanted to, rather than say, you've got to give me 48 hours notice and blah, blah, blah.
Given access.
Yeah.
Which was like an innovative idea.
It was.
Probably like no one else is doing that.
I also felt it was really important that the customers knew that they were paying me for some value. And so what was most common in the space at the time was a very summary invoice. Last month's services, hard cost, $400,000, 12% markup.
No breakdown.
Right.
Yeah.
And we reduced it to activity level breakdown in every invoice.
Which is so similar to law.
Yeah.
Like when you get a law invoice, it shows exactly.
But law, it says time, and this showed activity.
Yeah.
So it was, hey,
value.
Yeah, we got this many orders out, and these orders had these units, and they went to these places, and this is what your shipping costs.
Because when somebody's looking at that from a high
costs.
level, they just don't know. All they know is like, hey, this is a big bill.
It's a big bill.
Yeah.
And I realized real early on that the bookkeeper that was paying the bill, the person in charge of AP, was our biggest detractor.
Yeah, they didn't.
That accountant
they're
was
kind of
there.
the gatekeeper. Yeah, they're like the one that's like,
yeah, they're looking at the check and they're going, all I know is that fulfillment services occurred.
Yeah, what the crap are they doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so instead it was, okay, let's tell them how many pallets they have. Let's tell them how many orders.
Let's know their business better than they know their business. Yeah.
And really just give them some transparency. If this was their warehouse, what would it look like?
Yeah.
They would know those things. Wow. Okay, let's give them that.
That's
right?
so insightful.
So that was the change that
I'm
first
like
big change we made.
Fanatic on customer experience. I love receiving great service. I love giving great service. And I despise a bad service experience. You know what I mean? And so, I admire companies so much that care about that, because I really do think it's like, that's attitude.
Right.
Most of that's an attitude thing.
It is.
You know what I mean? It's like, we care enough that we're going to go solve this problem and make it.
Yes.
I think about this example of you're getting your tooth pulled out. And one guy, you tie the string around the tooth and tie it to the door, and you slam the door and it's bloody and it's like this horrific experience. And the next practice, you put on the Novocaine and you're listening to some nice music or watching a movie, and you get the tooth, and both of them the exact same outcome.
Right.
Except one of them's actually an enjoyable experience and the other one's pretty traumatic.
Yeah.
And you think about that with your business and how much equity value it created.
Right.
It's not that it's the same bill.
No, it is.
Or maybe there's an opportunity. Maybe it's an opportunity to increase it, because you can, if you can really, people will pay for value always. You know what I mean?
One of the things we found was that there was lots of stuff we were doing that we weren't invoicing for.
You didn't even know.
But once we started itemizing, we were now invoicing for more stuff. So we actually probably charged them more.
That's amazing.
But it required real empathy.
Yeah.
We had to put ourselves into the shoes of our customers and say,
and into that controller. That's
what are we
the
getting?
One, yeah,
right?
You got
this individual. What are we getting?
Yep.
And how does it look to us? And how can we give them what they need in order to feel good about this activity?
Wow.
So that was a crucial development in the business. And part of what came out of that was a realization that we weren't very good at picking orders. We were pretty mediocre operationally.
Interesting.
So that was when I kind of dug into that operational piece. Was at that it also exposed to me what Jared's superpower was
the creation.
Well, what he was amazing at that time, he had put a lot of time and effort into understanding the parcel world of the United States.
Okay.
So the FedEx, UPS, USPS, DHL, that whole universe, he had really put a lot of time and expertise into and effort into understanding that space, because he was certain that's where he could make much more money than on building individual orders.
Yeah.
And that got exposed as I started understanding our customers' viewpoint and why they thought the way they did and why that irritated Jared.
Yeah.
Because they were thinking of it one way and he thought they should think of it differently, but he's not a great communicator. And so he was super frustrated that they were doing dumb stuff. And he and I had a moment, actually, I was really client focused. So we had a client who had messed up, shipped their product via an air carrier, and the air carrier is a pretty well-known company located out of Memphis, and the product had gotten bumped off of the next leg, so it was stuck in Memphis, and it kept getting bumped day after day after day.
They can't get their product,
and it needed to get to Salt Lake. It had actually flown from, I think their manufacturing was in Arizona, so it had flown from Arizona to Memphis, and then got stuck there, and it needed to be in Salt Lake so that it could go out and satisfy all these back orders. So I used Jared's relationships and pushed Jared, and he called the company and got a friend of his who was in Memphis to go and get the stuff,
Actually, physically
2 pallets, physically get it on the plane and make sure the plane did not bump it before it took off. So that happened, and that meant it was arriving like at 8 in the evening to Salt Lake. So then I took the truck and went and picked up the pallets from the airport.
I love that
Put
stuff.
the 2 pallets in the
those are that's like the legends of like companies.
That's
like
special stuff, right?
Those are the stories that they talk about. This is who we are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the owner is picking up the pallet in his truck.
We had all the employees before they went home for the day build out all of the orders that could go out if this product arrived. The oldest orders that needed to go out.
Yeah.
And then we were going to get the product and just put it in the boxes, close the boxes, and put the labels on and send it out. And it was UPS that was doing the delivery. So we had I can't remember the pickup time, but I think it was like 9:00 was UPS delivery. So we had these orders all out on a conveyor belt. I come back with the 2 pallets, unload it, and Jared and I are supposed to be putting the items in the boxes. And each box has been labeled with the shipping label so that all we have to do is tape it and send it. And Jared, rather than loading the boxes, he started loading the boxes with the product. And then he's like walking down this line of all these orders, looking at the label and muttering to himself. And then he'd go to the next one, look at the label and mutter to himself. And I'm like, Star, that's his nickname, Star. Well, Star, you gotta help me, man. The UPS guy's on his way. And I don't know what you're doing, but you need to help me get this stuff in these boxes so we can get these orders out. All these are wrong. I'm like, what do you mean they're wrong? Like they're going to the wrong place or the wrong carrier? What do you mean they're wrong? Well, they're just wrong. They just did them wrong. I'm like, who did them wrong? Well, the customer, they chose to use UPS on all these. They should all go on the Postal Service. Great. Can you explain that to me tomorrow? But right now, can you help me get all this stuff in these boxes? Because the UPS guy's coming. And so like we load the boxes, UPS guy comes, we're 3/4 of the way done. We're literally, he would shut his door and we would open it again and put more stuff.
Come on.
Like we're fighting with the guy. We get all the stuff. It goes out the door. The next day, I'm like, okay, now that the problem is solved, what are you talking about? They did it wrong. What do you mean it should go USPS? What are you talking about? And he walked me through the analysis and he was right. It was about $2 cheaper per order to do it the way he felt it should be done. But the software at the time wouldn't accurately calculate it.
Yeah, couldn't do it.
And the
it's costing customers a lot of money.
The individual choices of those customers were hurting themselves.
Yeah.
And I had this aha moment where I realized Jared's superpower, what our real advantage was going to be, wasn't going to be great customer service. It was going to be around this parcel stuff.
Interesting.
And we were going to save him real money.
Wow.
And so that's
one
transformative
order, $2 an order.
Yeah.
You scale that over thousands, if not millions of orders. And it's like, you're creating crazy value for the people you work with that somebody else isn't creating.
Absolutely. And at the time, we probably had $1.5 million a year of spend with the U.S. Postal Service.
Wow.
When I sold the business to Maersk 11 years later, we did about $1.2 billion with the U.S. Postal Service. It was our superpower.
1000x?
Yeah.
Like,
it was big.
Holy smokes.
Right. And it was because Jared really understood it differently than everyone else did. Because he was a warehouse guy.
He knew.
He looked at the labels that came out of the software. He looked at it as boxes of stuff. And those boxes had attributes, weight, dimensions, breakability, time in transit it needed to hit, that kind of stuff. Most of the people in the space looked at it as a set of numbers.
For sure.
How far does it go? How much does it weigh? How much does it cost?
Yeah.
And that didn't take into account the dimensions.
Interesting.
And the dimensions really mattered.
But this little novel insight, and it was kind of the difference in like a lot of the equity value in your business.
Huge difference maker. Yeah. And it made us a big reseller of the Postal Service. Yeah. It made us a great fulfillment provider because we had this advantage
on everybody
against our competitors. We went and bought other fulfillment companies knowing that we would buy it.
We got a cost advantage. Yeah.
Yeah. We'd buy it for, say, $27 million. And we knew that exactly how it operated, but with our contracts, it would be worth 50 or 60 million instead of 27 million.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And so we were able to make very accretive acquisitions. We were able to make, going back to our early conversation around analysis and bets.
You were making decisions off of data.
Yeah, I was making bets. I'm looking at, hey,
you were the casino. You had the math in your favor.
Yeah, we bought a business that was our size. We bought a business that was 50% of our size and took our entire year's earnings in order to buy it. And we did bets like that, very aggressive bets.
You could do big bets because you just knew.
We felt we had better.
This is just a math
information.
problem. We're going to get that arbitrage.
And that math showed we were very conservative on it. One example I like to share, we identified a business. Market value was $14 million. They had private equity look at it. Everybody agreed what the multiple should be.
It was established.
Market value was $14 million. Seller didn't want to sell unless it was 27 or 28 million. And so we bought it from him for the price he wanted to sell at, not at market value. But we believed it was worth 54 million.
Because of the data and because of your metrics. It's just layering on your business.
We know what our contracts are. We don't have to change anything about the business except these contracts.
Plug it in.
Yeah. And we were wrong. It was probably worth closer to 70 to us that next year.
So you guys were conservative.
Yeah. So it was about 2 million. It was doing about 2 million a year of EBITDA, the 12 months preceding, and about 10 million after.
Peter Thiel. Have you ever read, there's a book called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
Mm-mm.
But he talks about this idea of what's the contrarian idea that you believe to be true that the rest of the world doesn't? And I think about that idea, and I think about you guys, and you have this contrarian view that you have tremendous conviction on. Mm-hmm. I mean, you go to a private equity process, and the world kind of says you're worth 14.
Right.
And this guy says, I know I'm worth 27.
Right.
And you guys are looking at it with a contrarian lens, but a lens you have a lot of conviction on.
Right.
And that's the difference in the equity value of your company. You know what I mean? That arbitrage and that idea and that conviction and being right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a difference between hey, I have this contrarian, but you guys kind of knew. Yeah. You guys knew your business cold.
And we found other areas like that. Like we had other acquisitions where we disagreed with how a business was thought of.
Yeah.
They thought they were a SaaS business and we thought they were a shipping business. We had a business that we thought we could buy better than them in freight, right? We had a business where we thought we could run the warehouse better than they were running it. So we had a lot of thesis that we ran in our acquisition strategy.
You would make investment decisions on based off there's inefficiency here.
Or they're not betting on what we knew.
They're not unlocking the value on this, but we're picking it up, as if it's one price, but we know it's another based off of our experience.
And it was really helpful. We talked a little earlier about luck.
Maybe that's
some of our luck was that.
Well, so I'm putting investing and operating in different buckets, but you're kind of investing the whole way.
The same.
You were an M&A firm. You guys were a roll-up firm.
We did good M&A. Half of our growth, when we sold to Maersk, half of our growth was organic, half of our growth was inorganic.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did good acquisitions, but a lot of those acquisitions were enabled by the fact that we were now operating
great operators. Yeah. You knew your business and you were innovating in your business.
We knew where we were different, and we would try and we'd find a target that was broken in one of the ways we believed we were good at.
Yeah.
And then we would look at what's the value that we would now create. And it was very much is this business more valuable to us than its current ownership?
Yeah.
That was the analysis we were doing.
Yep.
And ultimately that's, like I was saying, there's this thing when I'm talking about luck, one of the things that was very lucky for us is we sold at a great point in the market.
Yeah. That
was luck. But also it was the mindset that we had. If something was more valuable to us than to someone else, we should buy it.
Yeah. And
if something was more valuable to them than to us, we should sell it.
Was that hard for Jared?
I think so.
Because I've found that the entrepreneur falls in love with the business more. Yeah. There's kind of that, a degree of separation where you don't love it the same. You love it because but you're not married to it.
I tell people all the time, I'm not an entrepreneur. Jared is.
Yeah, when it's your child, it's different. And you see that where it's people lose their identity when they have a pile of money, but I lost my child, and Or that's not you. Like, you're like,
No. I was, to me, it was very much, and I told the Cynosure guys this. I said, yeah, if they offer $1 more than I think it's worth, I'll sell
that's
to them.
incredible.
And I remember, one of the guys going, no, don't say that. I mean, I'm not going to tell them that. But that's my analysis point. My analysis point is if they're
those
going to
guys are
offer
so good.
more,
The Cynosure guys are like,
great.
I'm an investor with those guys, and I just love the way they think about value. I love the way they think about partnership,
Yeah. I love the way they think about businesses as well.
Yeah.
They like pedestrian businesses that cash flow.
Yeah, kind of
more
sleepy,
than sexy businesses that
sleepy,
don't.
boring.
Yeah.
I'm in one with them that buys like toilets.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a sweet business. You're like porta potties, and you're
porta
like,
potties, caffeine, things that people need.
yeah, it's a custom. It's true. It's very true. So I want to shift gears for a minute. You had a run in volleyball that was like legendary on the side, like not casual. I'm playing on the weekends. Like,
yeah, we trained.
You guys
and we were
ran
pretty
the
good.
table. Yeah, like went for it. How does that come about? Like, did you play volleyball growing up?
No,
like,
and that's part of why it came about, right? I didn't. I learned how to play volleyball at BYU. BYU, of course, amazing men's and women's volleyball programs, and especially the men's is
kind of been a perennial,
probably the best program in the last 40 years, right?
Won some national championships, right?
The women's is I think third all time on the wins list or something crazy like that. Like these two are epic programs. Think of North Carolina in basketball.
They're that good.
Think of Alabama in football. They're at that level. And so I learned to play in a gym class at BYU and found that the sport was actually probably better suited for me than the sports I played in high school. High school, I got varsity letters in track, soccer, and basketball. And
so you were an athlete. Like it wasn't like about being an athlete.
But volleyball was like the stuff I was good at in hoop happened in volleyball. The stuff I was good at in soccer happened in volleyball.
The footwork, the jumping,
seeing something coming to you that's spinning and judging the spin and making a choice. And then the mental pressure that I loved. I was a high jumper in high school, and one of the reasons I loved it was that pressure. You're by yourself, and in a dual meet format, you're the last person competing.
Wow.
So everyone's watching you. And if it's coming down to your event, everyone's watching you and they want you to screw up or succeed. And I loved it.
You love the pressure.
The pressure was the best. Yeah. And volleyball, especially beach volleyball, 2-on-2, you have to do something every time. You don't get to hide. And whatever your weakness is, the other team is going to try and take advantage of it. And that mental pressure, I really liked it. So I started playing a lot of sand, 2-on-2, grass, 2-on-2 volleyball.
Just as a hobby to start? Just kind of just loving it?
Yeah.
When did it switch to like, I'm just loving this to I'm really good and I'm actually going to go be competitive?
When I got to law school, I had watched Jared Starling play at a tournament just prior to law school. Like, really great player, unbelievably good player, and he had come up played on the Junior Olympics and all that stuff.
Because that's how you guys met, right?
Yeah. Well, we met because I watched him play at a tournament, and I was just deciding that I was going to become good at the sport.
Yeah.
I was playing; it was fun, it was entertaining, and then I went, I should do this I should be good at this. I should be exceptional at this. So I went to the best court and watched them play. So I'm watching these guys play, and one of them is Jared. Yeah. One of them is Jake Gibb, 4-time Olympian.
Some real players.
One of them is Joe Famasino, who played on the AVP for a long time on the professional beach circuit. The other, a guy named Corey Kamanao. So I later on knew all these guys. But at the time, I knew none of these guys. And I'm watching them play, and I'm watching their personalities. And I'm like, that Jared Starling, that's the guy who should teach me to play volleyball. So
you just admired the way he played.
Yeah. And also his demeanor and mentality, his like approach to the sport and his like enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I'm an emotional player in sports. And so he was like fired up.
Yeah.
I just thought, man, that guy should be a great partner for me. So I enroll in law school. I go up to the bookstore on campus to get my books. I'd never talked to the guy, and I see him at the bookstore. So I walk up to him. I said, Jared Starling, right? He's all, yeah. I said, yeah, you're going to teach me to play volleyball. Like, I just think you're good at it and you're going to want to teach me. and he laughed and thought that was funny.
He was loving it.
And then he did.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And you guys just peanut butter and jelly since, like both playing volleyball and then like
the volleyball
like
thing was great. We coached volleyball together. We played tournaments all over. We played, great teams, teams that were very highly regarded.
Beat them, right?
We beat some very, very good teams.
Yeah.
Volleyball is a sport that unless you're in the top 5 in the country,
really
you're not going to make any money. But
Yeah.
if you're in the top 100, you can pay for your travel, right?
So it was like,
so that's where
you
we
were
were.
actually like professional volleyball. You were like making money. Like,
yeah,
you're not
very much.
Yeah, but I mean,
I used to, in fact, I had a conversation with some buddies who went down to California and made it their full-time job. And they're like, why don't you do this? You're good enough. You should do this. And I'm like, guys, I can't take the pay cut. I'm practicing law over here. I can't take the pay cut to be a beach volleyball player.
Oh, it's incredible.
But we developed a lot of our business rapport on the volleyball court. We coached at Judge Memorial High School.
Because I was going to say
together.
like that. I think about like some of the relationships that you have the highest level of trust. For me, it's like really intimate business relationships that are similar to sport. You're playing a game and sport. Like when you're like in the arena, you just learn a lot about people, who's with you, who's not, how they respond to pressure, how they respond to adversity. So you guys had to had a lot of reps at that.
How do you communicate too?
Yeah.
Like the honesty of communication between good teammates is really
100%.
high. And honestly, the honesty of communication between coworkers is not. It's not very high.
It's dysfunctional a lot of the time. It's
So he and I had a very honest communication pattern between us,
and obviously
long before it became a business
but you got to have high
environment.
trust to be able to be like bold and be able to, because you're not worried about offending or getting offended. You're worried about results, you know.
And you could also focus on, like, I knew what Jared's weaknesses were.
Yeah.
And he knew what my weaknesses were. And so without judgment, you can focus on covering your teammate's weakness. It was really easy when you're coming from a volleyball world where he's a great ground defender and I'm a great blocker.
Yeah, like that's
right?
so natural. It's like that's what you do to win.
So then in that business environment where I'm the communicator and he's not, there's no judgment associated with me being the communicator. Like on either direction, I'm not saying, well, I should be the main guy because it's his ideas, but he can't communicate them without me. And he's not sitting there going, well, he doesn't have the ideas. He just is a communicator. No, both of us are like, here's what we do. We talk. I make sure we're on the same page. I take that page and I give it to everybody. And that worked for us.
That's so cool.
So it was very cool. And we played some great volleyball. We were the first team not from the South Bay there in the LA area.
I was going to say like that
Manhattan 6-man.
Yeah.
Like we did very well and we had a lot of fun doing it.
How many years?
The wheels kind of came off in 2017. I'd say 16, 17 years.
So it was like a real run.
We would get up in the morning. Like when I was practicing law, we would get up in the morning at 5 in the summertime, meet, train for 2 hours, and then I'd go off to the
what a gift from
office.
God that you got like 16 years of playing a game.
Isn't it?
You know what I mean? I'm like, who gets to do that? Like you think about pro athletes, you know what I mean? Like I think about some of the experiences in my life that are the most fun. And it's like sport, you know, like when you're
and the community in and around sports is so great.
Fun.
Like I was aware of the value of community. So I was actively building the Utah volleyball community.
And that's part of your legacy is like Utah volleyball is way better because of you and Jared. Like you guys have put in like real time, money, and energy into building
and it
Utah
pays
volleyball.
back around, right?
Yeah.
Like I have 2 daughters who both play volleyball. One's 14 and one's 9.
Yeah.
The way I choose their coaches is I look through to see which of my buddies has a daughter that age and are they coaching.
Wow.
Right. And they get great coaching from my friends.
But
right?
you know who's good, who's not.
I'm not chasing this club or that club. I don't care about the club. I care about the
coach.
Coach, and does he match up with, does this coach match this daughter? Right. And like my one daughter, she's a little tempestuous. She's a little hard to work with at times. And so we've gone through a number of different close personal friends
to find
the right mix
fit
for her.
Yeah.
And we found it, and it's one of my buddies.
Been really great.
Yeah. But it's just, man, that's such a great thing to then pass that on to that next generation, or to see my buddies' kids playing college. I go to all the BYU games.
Of course.
And I'm looking at girls that I'm like, wait a second. Do I know? Let's look at the program. Oh, I know her. I've known her since she was 3.
Because that world gets small.
Yeah.
That world gets small. Yeah. Especially people who are good.
Yeah.
It gets
so that's
tight.
been great. And like both current coaches at BYU and their staff.
Kind of dear friends, right?
Yeah. We know them all. We're tight with them.
Yeah.
But Utah State's head coach, I think Rob's great. I love that guy. I played on teams with him. I played against him.
My wife was a college volleyball player.
She played at UV, right?
Yep, and I think about that experience and her love for Sam, her coach.
Sam Atoe is a great guy.
And I'm like, that was just a really special time in her life. You know what I mean? Like that was a really important time.
Yeah. I love it. I love seeing all of, I think every major college in Utah's head coach is a personal friend.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Like Weber State, Utah, BYU, like UVU, they're all friends.
Yeah.
I love that.
We honestly could go on all day. We need to do round 2, but I do have like one last piece that I want to dig into that's just always fascinating to me when I see people that when I look at the outside, and again, we've known each other for a couple of years, and so I, don't know you as well as I know some of my friends, but from the outside looking in, you guys have a great marriage. You got a real cool culture with your family. Professionally, you've done as well as someone can do. As an investor, you're a world class, and we didn't even get into the investing side, but you have like this really interesting thesis that I love. And so I'd love to get into that at some point. Talk to me about faith. Talk to me about how faith fits in all of that and how it drives decisions and how it, impacts, how it's impacted you.
Yeah. And when you say faith, are you meaning, formal religious faith or just actually the act of belief?
I think both. I think like that there's part of it that's like, a more formal philosophy. And then there's a second one that's just like a belief, you know what I mean? Yeah. I know where it plays a factor in my life. And I love figuring out how people think about that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that things that are true, things that are real principles are consistent. They work everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to kind of separate that question.
Yeah.
Because to me, anytime you decide that you're going to learn something and then do it, that's an act of faith.
Yeah.
Right? You've said to yourself, I have the ability to learn it, and then I have the ability to do it. So all of my business success is predicated on a real deep faith that I have, a belief.
Yeah, belief in yourself, belief in a positive outcome.
Yeah,
and if I put in the work, if I plant the seed, the tree will come up.
And it results in a real optimism.
Yeah,
regardless of what part of my life you're in, and as a result, it permeates everything. Like in sports, if you asked around the volleyball community, they would tell you that I always feel like I'm about to win.
Yeah.
Because I do.
You have this expectancy.
I'm always pretty certain this is about to go my direction. Any minute now.
Yeah.
Yes, we're down. It's game point and we're down by 8, but I've had this happen before and I come back and I win.
Yeah.
And so I'm certain it's going to happen this time too. And it doesn't make me depressed when it doesn't work. And that results in me being willing to play long games in business where I'm like, things will always work out. I'll just buy more time and it'll work out eventually. All arrows go up and to the right,
Yep.
But also I would say that grew out of that belief that permeates all of that part of my life grew out of a very strong religious conviction, a very strong faith-based religion. And so
is that mom and dad? Is that your brothers? Is that your community back east? A combination of all of it? Like where does that?
I don't know where that originates. I think that the LDS faith is one that does encourage individual seeking, and it challenges its members to believe and then act.
Yeah,
much more than many other faiths do. And so, oh, so you believe in this thing. Okay, give us 10% of your money. Oh, you believe in this thing. Well, take 2 years and go tell people about it.
Yeah.
You believe in this thing. It's sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right? So belief plus action is a very good definition of
it's
faith.
Required things from
right?
you. Yeah.
And that's a religion that fosters that.
Yeah.
And it fosters it for the betterment of your soul. And then incidentally, it also makes you better at other stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a part of it. I served a mission. And you hear people say, oh, it's the best 2 years of my life. It was not. You ask any of the missionaries I served with, they'll tell you, oh yeah, Adams will tell you that's not the best 2 years of his life. I didn't like it at all. I found it to be contrived and overly structured and not focused on the right goal. And it pushed me up against people I didn't want to interact with. And it was fantastic for me.
For you as a human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was awful. I hated it.
You didn't love it. I mean, I could say that same thing. I remember there was points in my mission that to this day were some of the hardest experiences I've ever had in my life. Living with people for 6 months that I'm like, I would have lived with this person for a day if I didn't make a commitment that I was like hell-bent on fulfilling. But I'm a way better human because of it. What I mean? Even like when I was selecting, when I'm choosing, who to go spend my life with, I had like this PTSD of like, don't marry somebody who's bipolar. Like, because you've lived with that and that was so hard.
Yeah.
Be really deliberate, because that was so hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And a lot of those learnings there have been impossibly valuable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I strongly recommend serving a mission. Like I want all 3 of my kids to go. But at the same time, I wouldn't take a phone call from one of my mission presidents.
Yeah.
There's another one I'd lay down in traffic for him.
Yeah.
Right. But one I would, man, if he was, I'd be hard pressed if he was bleeding on the side of the road to help him up.
Hard feelings.
It would be very hard for me to do. I had one of the huge blessings of my life. I had a kid I was raised with, first in Vegas, then in New Jersey. And our families were very close. And he incidentally got called to the same mission as me. And about halfway through my mission, when I was done, I'm like, this is so stupid. This is just not where I need to be. He felt inspired to go to the mission president and explain why the novel activity of taking 2 guys who grew up together and making them companions was the right choice.
Wow.
Yeah. And
changed your mission.
He made the argument, and he made the argument to a mission president who was willing to be inspired to do something unusual, and he took action on that. And in fact, Jeremy Andrus is grandfather.
Come on.
And so he took action on that.
Wow.
And so transfers happen. And here's my longtime buddy who grew up in this tiny ward of 60 people with me, who I played soccer with in Vegas as a little kid. And he's my new companion. And the first thing he says to me is, okay, you got to get your head right. Cause I can tell, did you buy a ticket already? Or are you just planning to buy one when you get to the airport?
Come on.
To go
So
home?
he could just speak
He's
straight
like, I can
to
see
you.
where you are. Yeah, how do we change this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I don't know. He's like, all right, well, we'll start tomorrow changing it. And it kept me around. It kept me working, got me going to the right place mentally, emotionally, and also taught me, how important it is the people around you.
I mean, I think about like
so
coincidences in my life, stuff that I didn't control, and how impactful it is on the course of my life. And that's the one where I'm like, oh my gosh, like
that's that luck.
Well, it's luck and it's God. Like
Right?
It's like there is something bigger at play here, because you take that experience.
Yeah.
You didn't have anything to do with that.
Oh, that's right.
And
and what I put in didn't get me out the outcome that I got.
Yeah.
I didn't deserve the outcome I got.
Wow.
Right. What I put in was not that, but
that's
was
like grace.
Yeah.
That's
grace.
like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Right. So it's the faith is a core part of what I am. I think that it permeates all the stuff that I do. I'm probably not your typical LDS person in a number of different ways, but it's a big enough tent that dudes like me fit.
That's so cool.
And I like that. And it's crucial to our family and how we build our family, how we structure it, how we think about it.
Yo.
That family culture you mentioned is very much driven by it as well.
Yo. Brother, this is a pleasure for me. you're a force of nature. There's like some of those in the world, and you're just one of them. You just like, when you decide something is going to happen, it happens. And I just admire that about you. I admire like the will to just go, you know what I mean, and go make things happen. And so anyway, appreciate you coming on, and look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Thank you.